to.
Okay.
You don't have to. We'll give it to you.
We'll
give it to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So you can focus on thinking.
Yes. I will read this. Yeah,
Is it okay?
think so. I can drink something of this.
This is water.
This water.
Yeah, both.
Water.
Yeah. Just imagine you're very thirsty. You can drink it all.
Okay.
Jawel, een oude, een heel oude. Ja, maar van OU hoor.
Ja, ik heb er 2 op een bureau liggen.
Ach.
Ja, daarboven is de knoopzak dicht.
Ja?
Ja, dat is foto's.
Maar dat lukt moeilijk, want sinds mijn nieuwe functie is mijn nek nog niet meer goed.
Raymond is there. Raymond.
How long did you work on your PhD? How many years?
Let me see. Almost 6 years.
Oh, 6 years, yes.
Almost, yes.
As this OU distance student, you worked on your PhD while working?
Yes, working with family, you know.
Okay, yes.
It's difficult.
Yes, I
Very
know.
difficult.
Yeah, but you managed.
Yeah,
You did the job.
it was able. Yeah, I managed to.
And how did you get into contact with Paul? Paul is also my promoter.
Yeah,
By
I
the
know.
way, yes, yes, yes.
Oh. You may all sit down. Okay, I hereby open this academic ceremony in which Jimmy Zambrano will defend his thesis entitled Implications of Team Expertise and Domain Knowledge on Collaborative Learning, a Cognitive Load Approach. We're looking forward to your presentation. I invite you to give a 15-minute presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, colleagues, promoter, co-promoter, querida familia y amigos, thank you for your presence. Today I will present a brief summary of my PhD thesis entitled Implication of Team Expertise and Domain Knowledge on Collaborative Learning, a Cognitive Load Approach. In the educational context, learning goals or intentions translate into learning tasks. Tasks are a set of information or mental representations that must be learned by each student to solve problems. Once the learning goal is clearly identified, decisions about instructional design should consider what the student knows, the complexity of the task or the cognitive demand that the task imposes on the students, and what the approach or instructional technique may encourage better learning. When designing a learning environment, we must consider human cognitive architecture. To this end, cognitive load theory can be used because its assumptions are based on how human cognitive architecture works. Theories of human memory share the idea that people have two types of memories. The working memory that can be only processed a small number of information elements for a few seconds, and a long-term memory that can store unlimited amounts of information elements. For example, for 3 + 6, a novel child might experience high cognitive loads in working memory. This is because the task is new and it has many information to be learned. However, if the child knows how to solve a problem, has relevant information in long-term memory, the working memory is expanded. People with much prior knowledge usually solve problems without mental effort, and even unconsciously. Sometimes there are tasks that require working memory capacity, even when the learner has the relevant knowledge in long-term memory. For example, for this example or task, the student required to find the missing number to up at 121. An advanced learner may experience high cognitive load with this problem. Why? Because the learner must carry out more mental operations to process more information elements. In any case, it is better to present the new information without overloading working memory capacity until the student has acquired relevant knowledge in long-term memory. According to the cognitive load theory, students don't easily learn new complex tasks due to the very limited capacity of working memory. If we expand this capacity, we can learn more complex tasks better. One way, of course, is to have more relevant knowledge in long-term memory. Another way would be to expand working memory capacity, for example, by learning in groups. Collaborative learning is an instructional technique where students, while learning among them, solving problems in small groups. There is some evidence that groups are more effective than individual students when they work on complex tasks. However, it is also known that groups are not always effective and efficient in all situations. For this reason, the main goal of this research was to determine the consequence of decreasing the cognitive load associated with group interactions when learning high complexity tasks. A collaborative learning group can be considered as a unit, as a whole, as a system that can simultaneously process most information elements than an individual students. This is possible due to the combination of the working memory of its members, which create a type of collective working memory. Learners must interact with each other when they learn in groups. Collaboration between people working on general topics they already know and using the same language perhaps does not impose too much cognitive load. However, when the topic is new, or there are no common language, or there are many interactions between group members that need to be coordinated, this imposes much cognitive load that negatively affect group and individual learning, and even remove the advantage of having a larger cognitive capacity or working memory capacity. In this research, we assume that group interaction can be improved, can be optimized by increasing the interaction related to the task and decreasing the interaction non-related to the task. I also assume that providing a student with a prior knowledge of the task similar to the new task may improve interaction, a prior knowledge about how to work together. Other goals were to examine how the distribution of the information among group members and the specific domain knowledge of a task may affect the result of student learning in experienced and non-experienced groups. After experiments, I studied whether learning in experienced groups increased performance, decreased cognitive load, and therefore increased efficiency. Results suggest that having prior experience of working together as a group improves the learning outcomes. That is, experienced groups outperformed non-experienced groups, perceived less mental effort or less cognitive load, and were more efficient. In addition, this study examined the interactions that characterize experienced and non-experienced groups. An analysis of verbal interactions showed that experienced groups had more socio-cognitive interactions and fewer cognitive, regulatory, and task-unrelated interactions. And there was no difference in the number of socio-emotional interactions. These first experiments suggest that prior collaborative experience allow groups to improve their interaction and learning. A second experiment looked at whether the distribution of information, the distribution of the information of the task among learners affects the learning of the group with and without collaborative experience. I tested the two types of distributions. Distribution that produce high level of interactivity among students, and a distribution of information that produce low level of interactivity among students. It was found that in tasks that require high level of interactivity, experienced groups were more efficient than non-experienced groups. Also, as expected, in tasks that require low level of interactivity among students in the group, no significant difference was found between these type of groups, experienced and non-experienced groups. It seems that groups that previously worked together, students that work in the same group on similar tasks, acquire relevant prior knowledge on how to work together and transfer this knowledge of working together to learn highly complex tasks. A third experiment examined whether having prior knowledge of the task, specifically of the task, affects the advantage of the experienced groups. But this time, experienced groups were compared with individual learners. Why with individual learners? Because The main goal of the task used in this research was to promote further individual learning. Then any instructional decisions should point to the learning goal. This experiment was designed to test whether learning in experience groups results in better individual learning, which was the final instructional goal, than learning individually. When students learn individually, in general, a more knowledgeable learner, those who have more prior knowledge of the task, have better results than less knowledgeable ones. The same was found when the students learn in groups. When learners are less knowledgeable, they begin the session with no prior knowledge. Groups have better results than individual learners. However, as expected, no difference was found when experienced groups and individual learners have the necessary prior knowledge of the tasks. According to these results, it appears that prior experience working together and prior knowledge of the specific task make up a structure in long-term memory that improve group interactions to learn highly complex tasks. Well, what we have learned from this whole research project as a whole. Firstly, collaboration may be more effective and efficient as an instructional strategy when learning high complex tasks, but when groups are prepared to collaboration. This implies that if we want to promote better learning results using collaborative learning, it is better to prepare the group of students, the group of learners, with already known and complex tasks that are similar to the new ones, to the new tasks. Second, the advantage of having prior collaborative experience depends on how the distribution of the task, the distribution of the information among group members, and the prior knowledge of the task that has each student. That is, if the student has relevant knowledge of the task, no matter if she or he works individually or in groups, work with groups only if all students are novice. And finally, cognitive law theory can explain why group interaction impose cognitive load, and that the interactions need to be improved, need to be optimized if we want the student to learn better. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your nice overview. We wait for 1 second till the screen is up. Yep. The opposition will be started by Professor Tricot from the University of Toulouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Estimate candidate, your PhD is very good, in my opinion. It is very well done, relevant, and innovative. But most of all, your results are important contribution to collaborative learning on one side and cognitive law theory on the other side. And I can say that I know you work before this defense because I read and I know you work since your first published paper, and I appreciate your work since this time. But I'm not here only to compliment you, and as an opponent, I have to ask questions. My first question is, how do you explain the benefit of being a member of an experienced group, considering the way you create this group? 4 sessions during 1 week, but both groups, the experiment and the non-experiment group, were instructed to, with 5 rules on how to collaborate to solve their problem. So my question is, what did the student learn during the 4 sessions, and how do they learn?
Highly learn opposite. Thank you for your question. If I understood correctly, what you want me to discuss is what is the benefit of the student that work in the experience groups on the one side, and the other, please.
And how do they learn during the 4 sessions? Because, and it is very interesting, in the two conditions, they have instruction about the 5 rules about how to collaborate during problem solving. But the difference between the experience and the non-experience is the 4 sessions.
Yes.
What do they learn during the session, and most importantly, how do they learn?
When you say, okay.
Another way to ask the question, do they learn to collaborate only by practicing collaboration?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for your question. Well, the benefits of being part of the experience group is firstly that the student had the opportunity to know each other, to know how to solve the tasks in order to learn a similar task. The idea is that the group member, before being imposed the load of learning a new one, they need to create a way of working together, because learning a new task and learning how to work with others for solving the task may be 2 completely different things. So maybe it's important to promote a better understanding between the students in order to solve properly the new tasks. That is the first benefit, but on your second, if I understand correctly your second question, your second sentence, is that what exactly they learn as a domain, maybe general or maybe situated to the group as a whole, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, at least there are 2 types of prior knowledge. The first one is related to the task itself, because we use 2 similar tasks, mathematical tasks. So one thing is to learn individually, to learn a mathematical task, and this implies to know a language that is of mathematics. Mm-hmm. So in order to, they need to be prepared for a similar task. So the student need to know how to work together for solving a math task. And this also related to the second one, the social aspect of working together. That is the group needed how to coordinate the different steps, the different specific movements that they needed to solve the problem in order to apply this to the new one. So there are at least 2 types of knowledge here that the group as a whole, the experience group knew. The one that is related to the group and the other related to the task itself. Because if not, maybe it's not possible to learn to work together in math and then apply to biology or to, yeah. Maybe that's the other type of learn they exactly.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor Ramírez of Maastricht University.
Thank you, Chairman. Dear candidate, let me first compliment you with completing the thesis, and I think you did a wonderful job. I really enjoyed reading the work, and I think it makes an important contribution both to cognitive load theory and to theories of collaborative learning. I have several questions, but first I'd like to follow up on the previous question of Professor Tricot, because I'm still a bit puzzled about what the students in chapter 3, in the first study, were learning. You claim that the experienced group was constructing collaboration schemes. And then I would expect that when they have these collaboration schemes, they can also apply these collaboration schemes when they come into a new group. But that's not what you do, because in the first phase, they work in a group and they develop these collaboration skills. But in the second phase, you keep the group intact. And that surprised me, because if it's really the collaboration skills they develop, it wouldn't make a difference to put them in another group. So I'm still not convinced that they are really developing collaboration skills. Maybe it's just getting to know each other, familiarizing yourself with the other members in the group. And that's the main thing. And for me, this is an urgent question, because in Maastricht University, we are using problem-based learning. So we also have small group learning. And in our system, students work in one group for 6 weeks. And then for the next course, they work in another group. And then they work in another group. If it's really the familiarizing that is important, we should give the students some kind of pre-training each time they start a new course, because they learn to know how to deal with the new members in the new group. If it's really the collaboration schemes, there is no problem, because they can apply these collaboration skills in each new group. So I wonder first what your idea is about this, and I also want you to explain again why in this first experiment you decided to keep the students in phase 1 and in phase 2 in the same group and not put them in another group, so that we could check whether they really develop the collaboration skills.
Highly learned opponent, thank you for your questions. In fact, that was the design. The students remaining in their own groups, yeah, because the assumption and the data, there are some evidence that when a student are removed from their own group and they are put in another group, there is evidence from other researchers that the performance decreases compared to those students who are working in the same group. It seems that the collaborative schema of working together is embedded, is situated, is contextualized in the group in which the student is working. So the schema is highly is dependent of the group as a whole. That is why if we compare in another chapter the results of experienced and non-experienced groups, the experienced groups have better performed better results than non-experienced groups, and compared with other research investigations, the students that are put in different groups compared to those are in the same group perform worst. Okay. So maybe the schema is constructed in the group, so it needs to be translated. Now, obviously, sometimes the universities or designs situation in that the student need to change the group. Yeah? And maybe there are some skills that the student have to apply to the new group. But maybe it's much more better to share the same way of working together to solve the problem. Because if the student need to learn how to work together in a new group, and at the same time to learn the new task, maybe that would overload the working memory of the student and the working memory of the group as a whole. So that is the reason why. So the schema is related to the task on the, to the group.
So what would you recommend to Maastricht University? Should we do some collaboration training each time that students enter a new group? Is that what you are advising?
Yes, when the student are novice, when the student don't know don't know the task, when the student don't know the other students they have to work, it's better to be prepared in order to be successful in working together, because they, again, it's better to know how to face the new opportunity of learning together. That is one recommendation, but also depends on the complexity of the task. Because if the task is highly complex, if the task demands much more, because in the chapter 4, we can say that there is empirical evidence that this task demand highly level of interactivity, which increase the complexity of the task itself and demand more talking each other. So in this case, the student need to be prepared for be successful working together as a whole, as a group, and obviously individually. So it's a recommendation to be prepared in that case.
Okay, okay. May I ask another question, Chairman?
A short one. Okay.
Yeah. A question that is maybe a bit related, and that is dealing with chapter 5, in which you study this task-specific prior knowledge. It might be a bit related to my first question. In this chapter 5, you find that if students have a lot of task-specific prior knowledge, there is not really an added value of collaboration anymore. Then the individual students are doing as well as the groups. But this is a line of reasoning that is only looking at the domain-specific knowledge. And I think in many systems, like Maastricht problem-based learning, we are not only using collaboration because it helps students to develop domain-specific knowledge, but we are also using collaboration because we want to teach them how to collaborate in diverse groups. So that's an extra complication. And then my question is, do your studies provide any guidelines for how to organize that? Should we first teach the domain-specific knowledge and only then the collaboration skills? Or should we first teach the collaboration skills and only then the domain-specific knowledge? Or should we do it simultaneously and integrate the teaching of the domain-specific knowledge with the teaching of the collaboration skills? And of course it's tempting to say, well, it's best to integrate it, but that's also raising cognitive load the most.
Right.
So how do you look at that?
Yeah, okay. If we have to decide what is first of working with the task, the new task, you say, the new learning task. Again, that depends on the task, the complexity of the task. Yeah? If the task is not complex, we don't need to work with groups anymore, because the task can be learned individually. If the task is highly complex,
unless we also want to teach the collaboration skills, because we can only teach collaboration skills when there is collaboration going.
The thing is that if the learning task if the learning goal is to learn, to maintain specific knowledge individually. If the goal of the instructional design is to learn or domain this task, each student, yeah, not only as a group, but each individual student, and it's complex, and the student don't have prior knowledge. It's, according to this data, it is better to use a task that they previously know in order to acquire the specific skills for working together to apply to a new task. Because, well, I know that there is popular maybe, and there are different agencies or different international institutions that promote that there are some general domain skills related to collaboration. However, according to this data, according to other research, the data does not support that claim because the student need to know how to work together for specific tasks, for specific situations. If we increase the cognitive, if we put the student to know the task and the new task, and then to know to work together is not relevant. It's best to know together with a task that they already know, no? And then to work as a group for new tasks. Because there is no general scale for collaboration. There is no general scale that is situated to the task. So I would recommend first to work with the student in how to collaborate among them before working with the new tasks.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We continue the opposition with Professor Kreins from the Open University.
Esteemed candidate, it was a pleasure to read your dissertation, as it made me aware of the explanation power that cognitive load theory potentially carries when applied in the domain of collaborative learning. You know, collaborative learning is traditionally studied from a motivational or from a social constructivist perspective. It was generally found that collaborative learning was superior to individual learning in many cases, but there are also cases in which the opposite is true. Explanation why this is the case has not yet been answered. Therefore, I am glad that your research built on those who has taken first steps in that direction. Nevertheless, I have some questions about your research, from which I hope you will reveal the answers here. My first question is, let's see. Okay. In experiment 1, that involved the issue of experienced versus non-experienced collaborative learners, you are discussing the results. Thereby, you remarked that the results of this study can be interpreted from theoretical frameworks other than cognitive load theory. You can find that on page 53, I believe. Does this mean that you suggest that there is a redundancy effect when using cognitive load theory because other theories could do the interpretation as well, and thus one of them is not needed? My question is then, which of the theories would you like to keep and which would you drop and why?
Highly learned opponent. I confused me in Spanish, sorry. If I understand correctly, is what other theory could explain the result of this chapter? Because cognitive load theory maybe is not the only way to explain the data, right?
Yes, apparently you are suggesting there are more theories explaining the same findings. So then one is superfluous.
Okay, well, collaborative learning has been studied from different perspectives, motivational, there are constructivist view for mostly constructivist view for collaboration, and they maybe have a view of why collaboration might work better. Yeah? The idea of taking into account cognitive theory is because we took into account the complexity of the task and the result derived from this different aspects of the design. However, there are other theories such as, or there are other perspectives such as cohesion, group cohesion, for instance, that propose that the students that are more familiar between them, among them, they know each other, they have a sense of shared goal in order to learn. This sense of cohesion, maybe, this the theory of cohesion may explain why a student achieve this type of, this high level of learning. There is other theory, for instance, the group development that has been, for instance, studied by the researcher Franzen, in which they are, in whose research there is evidence that those groups that have shared mental model, apparently they have a better learning. So there are other theories that may explain why groups achieve better learning than specifically groups that have working together, than those groups that don't have the opportunity to work together. There are other visions to interpret these results. However, I took into account cognitive law theory because these other theories doesn't take into account that learning happens in the mind. No matter we are speaking with other people, in any case, any specific student, any individual student need to process the information of the task of the other in order to learn better. So that is a missing point in the other theories that also try to say why the experienced group are better in the situation in which the groups are working together previously.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
The opposition will be continued by Dr. Jansen from Utrecht University.
Thank you, Chairman. Highly learned, dear candidate. I also read your thesis with much pleasure. It is a topic that is close to my own research interest, so it was very, very good to see how you approached this topic that I've also investigated lots of times through a series of experiments that build on nicely on each other, which always have the same methodology and vary certain aspects in the instructional strategy of collaborative learning. So I really enjoyed it, and it really broadened my knowledge of why collaborative learning can be effective in some cases and is maybe less effective in other cases. For my first question, I would like to follow up on the question of Professor van Marienboer, because I think he also asked you to reflect on the goals of collaborative learning. And I think you gave a quite technical answer there. And I would like you to reflect on why educators sometimes use collaborative learning. And I noticed in your biography that you used to be a teacher as well. Maybe you've used collaborative learning in your own teaching as well. And if I look at why teachers use collaborative learning in the classroom, whether it's in primary education or, for example, in higher education, they usually have multiple goals. And in your thesis, you seem to focus on one of those goals, which is, you know, the cognitive benefit of collaborative learning. But when you talk to educators, they also see different goals, like you know, being able to work in groups, to learn that, to be able to take the perspective of the other. Could you reflect for me on what you see as the benefits of collaborative learning, and do you see that there are, how do you see that?
Yeah, yes. Well, firstly, the design. Thank you first, esteemed opponent, for your question.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, firstly, the main goal, well, it's important to take into account the main goal of instruction. Yeah, if the learning goal is to learn domain-specific tasks that need to be evaluated individually, so the best way to teach this task is individually, usually. And sometimes there is a belief that even individual tasks should be need to be taught in collaboration in order to promote an individual learning. So when I try to recommend always what is the purpose of instruction. If the purpose of instruction is to the student to learn individually, obviously a collaboration maybe is not good because the idea is to test the student, the knowledge of the student acquired individually, not in group. Yeah? So when I speak with the other professors, other teachers, I say, wait, how do you want, how you will test the student?
Yeah, so
individually and group.
Yeah, so you're talking about alignment. If the goal is that they learn something individually, then teach them individually. Yeah, okay.
Only work in group if the group may create a better learning space than learning individually for the individual learning goal.
And how do you react then to educators who say, okay, the individual learning goal is maybe even less important than developing social skills, collaborative skills, being able to take the perspective of another? Do you agree that that could also be a goal of collaborative learning?
Depending the task, depending the goal of the task, depending the goal of the formation, depending the goal of I disagree if they say that in general we need to improve the social aspect of the students. If we have to teach the students that social aspects by teaching them a specific domain knowledge task, that is not the appropriate way maybe, because the learning environment always will be focused on the learner to focus on the task specific. So in any case, the social aspect of always will be a second place in this case. So it's important, but depend on the task also. What you want to teach to the students? You want to teach how to socialize, maybe it's important to go to play soccer, maybe. Because that's the most important than learning mathematics.
Usually the reasoning, for instance, in universities is, okay, we have to prepare our students for the life after the university. They will work in different teams with people from different backgrounds, with different expertise. We have to prepare them for that.
Yes,
so what's the role of collaborative learning in that? Or do you see that, that there's no role for collaborative learning?
Well, that is a real task. If the real task would be to work with different background people, well, let's bring different people.
Yeah.
In order to improve collaboration with these other people. Because, for instance, I am from Ecuador. I need to learn with Dutch people. So I don't know the culture. And
it's probably a big difference.
Yeah, it's different, exactly. So I have to learn the Dutch culture. I need to work with the Dutch people. Yeah. It's impossible to know that learning mathematics.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So the better maybe if it's important to teach a student social or multilingual or interpersonal with different background skills or communication or something like that, it's better to create the appropriate learning environment for that. Yeah, just for giving an example, when I teach other teachers, and that in a city that is 8 hours from my when I was born, it's a different environment, different people, different culture. So you want your students to accept the others, the culture of the other. Please create the environment, invite other people to the class, and create the environment in which the student need to create a new task, for a new toy, whatever, but with other students, with different culture, because that is the main goal of the task, not exactly the other.
Yeah.
Okay. That would be...
I think we agree then that collaborative learning can have cognitive benefits, but if you design the task well, it could also help for other skills. Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And from Dr. Janssen, we go to Dr. Fransen, and he's from Hogeschool in Holland. I give you the floor.
Dear candidate, I would like to congratulate you on your excellent and well-written dissertation. It was a pleasure to read it, and you have done extremely relevant research into collaborative learning in education. The complexity of this pedagogical approach is usually underestimated. So by investigating collaborative learning from the perspective of cognitive load, you have contributed substantially to the insight that this complex approach can only be effective if a number of conditions are met. So in that regard, I would like to pose a question related to the concept of shared mental models. Based on previous research and in your theory chapter, you refer to a division into 4 types of shared mental models, namely the task model, team interaction model, team model, and equipment model. You indicated that research shows that the task model is the most important model and therefore also dominant condition for effective collaborative learning. While the other 3 mental models are labeled as secondary or supplementary in that regard. However, in your second study, you mentioned the importance of a positive interdependence and most important effect as most important effect of experience in collaborating. So this seems to indicate that the team model and the team interaction model are the most dominant conditions for effective collaborative learning. Can you reflect on these findings in the perspective of what we know from previous research on shared mental models, and how did the distinction between 4 types of mental models play a role in the analysis of the interaction of teams?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. May I have the exactly what is the...
Okay.
The number is...
I didn't mention number. No, it's correct. I looked it up myself.
Okay. Thank you. Well, in fact, there I mentioned 4 types of mental model. Yeah. During the discussion of the thesis, I put well, it's not completely true that only put attention to the task, shared mental model. I put attention of the shared mental model related to the task for creating this experience group. That is, it's important to create a shared mental model, common ground of the group, but that is situated in the task. Yeah, mostly collaborative learning theories or perspective. Those put attention on the relevance of the task in creating the group. So it's taken for granted that the group create a general skill that can be applied to different tasks. So I put maybe more emphasis on the task because the shared mental model is shared is in the mind of all of the students, but it's based on a specific task that need to be implemented to a similar task. In general, all the shared mental model play a role, all, depending of the task, obviously. If some tasks require, for instance, manipulation of some instruments, for instance, we are teaching to a group of doctors or a surgeon that need to be collaborate with others, or the nurses. They need to develop shared mental model at group level that presuppose, obviously, to know how to work with the instrument, with the apparatus, or with other things. And especially, big part, the center is the task in any case, because we have to perform a surgery. So all these mental model play an important role in collaboration, but I say that in the task is important for creating this shared mental model, because the shared mental model presuppose the social aspects of the collaboration, but not necessarily the opposite. Not because we assume that the students how to know to work together, they know how to solve the task. So they are these two types of shared mental model for creating this experience grouping together.
So in any case, the task shared mental model is the most important one, and the team mental model is less important?
Vote. It's not possible to separate both two things, because the shared mental model as a social aspect is related with what the group will do in any case. It's not separated.
You before mentioned also that the task and team shared mental models are more or less contextualized.
Yes.
They are developed within a team, a specific team, with a specific task. And in that case, I was wondering why you very constantly use the term group and never they use the term team.
Okay, in the context of this research, there is no difference, because team mostly is applied for the organizational literature.
But when does a group become a team? What is the moment that you call a group a team?
Well, in the context of this research, in the context of this dissertation, and in the context of the school collaborative learning, a group may be a team when they have to work together on specific tasks.
Okay. Then they are from scratch. They are a team from the moment they start. Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
No, they need to know.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we go for a second round, and the opposition will be continued by Professor Trico.
Estimate candidate, I have another question. Your analysis found that experienced groups spend significantly more time on task than the non-experienced group. You obtained this result in the first experiment. Do you think that time on task can contribute to explain the result? Or another way to ask the same question, why you didn't discuss time on task on the other experiment?
Okay, yes. Well, the time of task was reported when analyzing the 10 groups, the 5 experienced and the 5 non-experienced groups, in which I perform analysis by each of the interactions. So I try to understand the time invested by the group in all these interactions. So the total amount of time in the experience group were high. They invest most time. But it's not considered in the other experiments because the time was fixed. There was Firstly, we designed a task that needed to be performed by a knowledgeable student, yeah? And then we give the same time to the group. So, from cognitive load perspective, at least for the, but there are many working memory models in which time is important. The more time, more capacity to perform more tasks. However, the students were given enough time to solve the problem independently of the group they are working on. So for that reason, it's not important time in these experiments. It's important time maybe if we if we are able to perform an analysis of the process of happening in the mind of the student in collaboration to determine if during a normal or a time scale there is evidence of complexity, but that is not the case. We only determine the time that any normal student would perform correctly this task, and that's all. But obviously we know that time could be an important variable in this time. But again, that depends on the model of the working memory model, the perspective of the working memory.
Okay. Thank you.
The opposition will be continued by Professor van Merienboer.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, time is limited, but maybe you can ask one of your paranymphs to read out proposition number 5.
If expertise requires indefinite amounts of domain-specific knowledge, then even experts will never have complete knowledge, allowing them to solve all problems. Tricot and Sweller, 2014.
Thank you. Well, with regard to the first part of this proposition, if expertise requires indefinite amounts of domain-specific knowledge, I cannot disagree because Professor Tricot is next to me. But I do disagree with the second part of the sentence. When we talk about problem solving takes place in different ways. And it can be rule-based, in which we have rules in memory allowing us to perform the recurrent or routine aspects of the problem. We can do it schema-based, and then we have the cognitive schemas that allow us to interpret new elements in the problem and to use our knowledge to solve it. And then we have the weak methods, which are innate methods, and that we can use to solve any kind of problem. So I would argue that maybe experts will not have complete knowledge allowing them to solve all problems in a rule-based or schema-based fashion, but they do have the complete knowledge because they can always rely on their weak method problem solving. Maybe I could even say that everybody has complete knowledge to solve all problems because we have this innate ability to approach all kinds of problems that we can encounter in the world. So I'm curious how you look into that and if you agree with me that basically all human beings are able to solve all problems because of their cognitive architecture that is built on weak method problem solving.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Firstly, an expert is who has...
The time to defend your thesis is now over. The defense committee will go to the ground room to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I kindly request you and your paranymphs to get seated in the room and wait till we're back with our verdict.
Thank you.
come on stage with your parents. The doctorate board, represented by the Defense Committee, has decided to award you the PhD, and your supervisor is authorized to give you the PhD. So you can turn to the other side.
By virtue of the powers vested in us by Dutch law, in accordance with the decision of the doctorate board, I confer on you, Jimmy Antonio Zambrano, the title of doctor and all the rights and all duties to science and society associated by Dutch law or custom to a PhD degree on the Open University of the Netherlands. Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of academic integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, critical and transparent, independent and impartial?
I promise.
As proof of this PhD degree, I present you with this certificate signed by the Rector Magnificus, Chair and Supervisors, and Co-Supervisor Femke Kirschner will give you the PhD, your thesis, signed by all members of the Defense Committee present here today.
Thank you.
This is signed.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
You all may sit down.
Except for me. Please come here. Come by.
Yeah, that's it.
Young Dr. Zambrano, dear Jimmy, let me be the first to congratulate you with this achievement. Not only for yourself, for myself, but also for Femke and John who could not be here today. Nothing's wrong with him, he just couldn't be here today. The three of us are both happy and proud. The first mail that I can find from you dates back to February 22nd, 2013. In that mail was a timid request about the possibility of your doing a PhD with me from Ecuador. You had the idea to study how certain aspects of learning teams could affect the learning of the individual team members. You also said that you wanted to do this within the framework of cognitive load theory. This sounded familiar to me, and that made it both interesting and challenging. Interesting because I had once, along with a colleague, written a proposal for a similar PhD research project, which was successfully completed by the person sitting on my right, which, by the way, I was not allowed to supervise. I still hate the Open University for that, but which I continued to be involved in. At the time of that proposal, I was studying collaborative load theory, cognitive load theory, cognitive load theory, and was on the verge of taking the post of Professor of Computer-Supported Collaborative Learning in Utrecht. Collaborative learning and cognitive load theory also then seemed to be a perfect combination. On the other hand, it was challenging because it had to be something new, something that was never studied before. In my return mail, I sent you 3 documents, namely the short and the long forms for a PhD project, which we at CELSTEC used, plus the proposal that I had written for you to use as a type of model. I was very curious to find out what you understood and what you could already do. Reading your first thoughts in the short form on what you called implications of the cognitive load effects to the collaborative learning on complex tasks, I immediately saw that you were a diamond, just waiting to be polished. The short form of your proposal presented a clear theoretical basis. 3 research questions, tables containing 3 conditions for each research question, and 8 dependent variables. A plan for training students to transition from groups to teams, and further. What's more, you understood the concept of transaction costs and how they could affect both collaborative learning and cognitive load. At that moment, I thought two things. First, this research has real potential to make a significant contribution to what we know about making collaborative learning more effective and efficient, while at the same time contributing to the theory of cognitive load. Second, I knew that I needed a co-promoter who was an expert in all of these facets. The logical choice, the logical person, was the person who carried out that original study on collaborative load theory, cognitive load theory, collaborative learning, and transaction costs. Femke. Luckily, she said yes immediately. What follows was more than 7 years of intensive collaboration. In those years, we became a true collaborative working and learning team. Communication was sometimes via email, spiced with almost monthly Thursday night Skype calls between Ecuador, Utrecht, and Hoensbroek. This collaboration fit all the aspects of what we were studying. There were considerable transaction costs related to the communication, 3 languages, and coordination. As we transitioned to a real team, these transaction costs decreased. On the other hand, even though the costs were high, the benefits of working together clearly were greater than the costs. One of the benefits came out of our thoughts about how cognitive load theory needed to be tweaked to deal with collaborative learning. Cognitive load theory is a theory relating, as you said, to individual learning, and the question for us was how we could or should be modified for understanding collaborative learning. At this point, I went to the master, John Sweller, and asked him whether he thought we were crazy or if our ideas were viable. His answer was enthusiastically the latter, and this resulted in both a groundbreaking article with him on transitioning CLT to CCLT, cognitive load theory to collaborative cognitive load theory. At this moment, with more than 24,000 downloads, and it was only published last year, it has 20 times the number of downloads as the next following article in that journal. Plus, eventually, he's becoming a 3rd supervisor. In the end, you've published 4 articles, plus 1 in a review, and 1 in the pipeline, and 1 book chapter. You've also presented at the ISLS CSCL conference in London, and today you successfully defended your thesis. But you've also done other things. In those 6.5, 7 years, you've taught at different colleges and universities, changed jobs a number of times, moved your family, gotten a master's degree in distance education at the University of Loja, Ecuador, an educational doctorate at the Universidad Católica Andrés Bello in Caracas, Venezuela, and have been a loving husband to Marcia and a father of 2 beautiful children. Jimmy, I call him Jimmy Jr. I know I'm not allowed to, but it's Jimmy Jr. and Zoe. Our monthly Skypes have been a combination of deep discussions, sometimes sidetracked by both differences in language, but also differences of vision on the theory, and friendly banter about home, work, and children. You are the epitome, the example of a dedicated academic and lifelong learner, and I'm glad you entered our lives. Femke, John, and I would like to congratulate you, and of course Marcia, on this great achievement.
Thank you, Sir.
Felicidades, Dr. Zambrano. Yeah, see. Congratulations on behalf of the doctoral board. I also want to congratulate your wife and your children. We will now go to the reception, and I will close the academic ceremony. And thanks for all the guests from outside who came from all the way from Toulouse and other places in the Netherlands to be here present at the defense. Thank you very much, and if you follow me and the others, you will enter the reception.